Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Evening all. How is it going? Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. We thought we'd do an impromptu live today just to talk about whatever we want, really, in a general sense. I've got Yasmin and Nathan here. How's it going, guys?
Yeah, good. I'm having like an extremely lazy day. Probably tell I'm actually in bed.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice, sounds good. Nathan, been up to much?
Went skateboarding because I'm like I'm like a walking, talking midlife crisis. When I like I went. It's been sunny today, so I went down on the bay and went skateboarding. So yeah,
isn't there that movie? Is it Back to the Future? Where, well, no, I mean he was actually cool, Marty McFly, but I'm sure there's another one where it's a really old guy with a skateboard, trying to pretend he's young.
There's a meme of like Steve Buscemi with a skateboard where he's like, hey kids, look at me. But that's my kind of general style at the moment. It's like I got told what subjects I'm teaching next year, and after half term, and I went out and bought myself a skateboard.
Well, talking of midlife crisis, yesterday in school, a fellow science teacher in my school, I was doing duty, and he came over for a chat, and there were 5 year 7 girls just wandering through the foyer area, and they said, "Mr. Rogers, how old are you?" And I said, "Well, how old? Depends what you're asking. How old am I, or how old do I feel I am?" So I said, "I'm 40, but I feel like 55 at the moment." Anyway, this science teacher who was next to me, he's actually 48, right? And they were like, they couldn't believe that this guy was older than me, which I found deeply upsetting. Because he does look like a bit like you, Nath. Like he's a bit surfery and a bit like, he regularly goes snowboarding and he's very active.
We can try out this now, Tom, if you like, because I don't think Yasmin knows the ages.
I've just revealed my age.
Okay, so how much younger or older am I than Tom?
I mean, based on what Tom just said, I'm gonna just guess that you're older. I think Tom said that he was 40.
Yeah.
I would guess then that you're 42.
I'm 44.
Oh,
44.
you actually you do look very young. I mean, not that 44 is old.
I'll take that.
Yeah, but you know what, kids.
I threw in some clues there. Tom had already gone with 40. I'd said midlife crisis, but I work with someone who's like the same school year as me, and there's 2 teachers in the sort of little department I'm in, and I'm one, and she's the other, and we're the same school year, and it is painful though, because like people do think I'm slightly younger than I am because of the immaturity and the buying skateboards and things, but they think that she's younger than me. So I get it all the time where it's like, oh yeah. Like it's like a half compliment of like, you don't look as old as you could look, but you don't look as good as that person. Like they look,
honestly,
they still look younger.
If I didn't know how old Tom was, I wouldn't have guessed that you were over 40.
Now we start with some compliments.
Yeah.
Nathan's
I wouldn't have guessed.
He's surprised, probably because he's.
I don't know.
Every time he sees me, I look really run down.
I'm not saying it's the look necessarily, but the sometimes the demeanor is of someone who's been worn down by the education system. You know, someone who's been slowly.
I accept that.
Maybe there's a question for you. You know, we could get YouGov or someone on it to do like do teachers look old? Age? Does teaching age you? Does it?
You know, we need you. Have you ever seen that really viral video of the dad that recorded his daughter every day from birth to like 18? I feel like we need like a teacher version, like just get someone to like take a picture of themselves, like
from
a longitudinal
NQT to,
to like
SLT, yeah, or UPS.
NQT to quitting the profession in 3 years. It'd be like the shortest.
I was gonna say,
and then they'd have like a massive like uptick afterwards.
Yeah, like a glow up. I quit teaching, and look how much better and healthier I look. All the bags under my eyes have gone. I'm, I think there's something there.
To be fair, today after school, I went for a run and a swim in the sea. I did the same thing last week, so I am trying to do a bit of a health kick. I'm playing football twice a week as well, so I'm really trying to do something. But the problem is my diet's appalling. Yasmin, you know that I drink inordinate amounts of Coke Zero. I eat a lot of empanada. I eat a lot of. I sometimes have a cerveza, a cheeky cerveza, Estrella Galicia probably, and just eat a lot of. I like literally today. I just ate a bowl of vegetables with no seasoning in them. Just nothing. Just I felt like I needed to eat raw vegetables. No, seriously. I haven't even finished. Look.
I feel like we should never feel guilty about our diet. Like, I genuinely believe that. Like, I feel like the human body is designed for you to just not be too hard on yourself.
Well, you're a science teacher, so should we listen to you when you say that?
Right. Well, like, Tom, you will probably hate this as a concept when I explain my attitude towards food, but I don't like eating particularly, right?
Yeah,
I don't get any enjoyment out of it or the stuff like that. I do it for show. So like I'll go out for food. I'll do it as the social performance. But I see it very much as just refueling. So I just I treat it as fuel. So literally sometimes I'll get home from work and I'll be like, look, not what wonderful thing should I cook for dinner or whatever. I'll be like, right, I need to just onboard some calories. What calories can I put inside the machine? And just go like that. So
no, I'm the same. I'm the same. I'm a terrible sort of ready meal man / very quick sort of meals. Pretty predictable. I've just never. Is
your lifestyle now though like cultural in the sense that you're in a different country, right? It's a different. Was it like that?
Full disclosure for everyone out there. I'm in Spain, so in northern Spain though, which is a bit different than the southern, than southern Spain. It's probably much more Spanish in some respects, right? So yeah, probably yeah, but mainly when I go out for say food and drink. If I'm in, I'm probably eating similarly, probably. But the biggest difference is I'm eating later. I'm eating later, right? I mean, whereas in the UK, I'd probably be having dinner at 6:30 maybe. Whereas here I'm having dinner at like 8:30 or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the restaurants don't start serving food until 8. You can't go out until 8 at minimum. Nowhere serves food till 8.
I'm really interested on this now, actually. Like as a thing, like what about like at school, like staff room attitude towards food? Is it like where you're at? Is it like an English school, or is it like I don't know. Loads of tapas.
Well, to be fair, I mean, my chain of schools before, because I had a stint not in the school I'm in now, but in another school that's sort of in the same regional area as the school I'm in now in 2017, 2018. And I know that a few years before I started there, so let's call it like 2013, 14, they had siestas for the kids as well as the staff, right? I mean,
that's really cool.
That changed. I mean, that changed by the time I'd arrived there. But I mean, it was that particular school, which is part now. It's very similar to the school I work in now in terms of the way it's set up and stuff. And it's actually owned by the same group of schools now, anyway. But back then, it was owned by sort of an individual from that city who decided to set up a private school, right? So I guess she probably just brought in her own sort of ideas about Spanish lifestyles into the school rather than like our version of a British education system, right? But by the time I got there, it's pretty normal. I mean, lunchtime in the school is just exactly. I mean, this is the thing, right? I mean, school life just means that you literally just scoff food. Like today, I ate my dinner on duty, so I had a chair. And I got another chair. I mean, some of the kids were laughing at this, but I got a chair. I was on a chair. The chair was my table. So I was eating the food off the chair because I was on duty there. And I was like, I need to eat this. And literally, I ate it in about 3.5 minutes.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the thing about teaching, though. Just having like really limited time. I feel like that's what kind of turned me into a snacker. Like I just would have snacks all the time because there wasn't really much time to kind of sit and have a proper meal. So I always just kind of had something in my hand or just something to grab or to go like in my bag or on my desk because like, and it was always like high sugar so that I could get through the day. And then that kind of attitude or those habits rather just followed me into weekends and holidays.
My boss basically said the other week to me that she doesn't have any lunch. She never has lunch.
It's actually, but scientifically,
it's probably good.
And I did actually try this. Yeah, it's kind of, I actually see why some people don't have lunch, especially if they do it deliberately and not just because they didn't have time, because you tend to have a dip in your blood sugar after, whereas if you avoid it, it's easier to keep it a bit more constant, or the drop is a bit like less steep, so it's slower.
I can't remember if I told Nathan this, but last year I did 6 months of intermittent fasting.
Yeah,
so I did
good for you.
Monday and Thursday. It was 700 calories on a Monday and a Thursday, and I managed to stick to that for 6 months. But I moved to Spain, and you miss a week, and it's really tough to go back.
Yeah.
After that,
that is really, really good for you though. It's like anti-inflammatory.
Yeah, although it is and it isn't, because you soon work out that Diet Coke has 0 calories. So when you're then starving hungry, what do? You're gonna have
10 cans
because you go Diet Coke 0 calories. I probably drank more Diet Coke than I do now. But yeah, it was tough at times. It's tough. Yeah.
I don't believe that Diet Coke has 0 calories. Is that true?
It's true. It has 1 point on Weight Watchers. I think it's one of the only items that has that score on Weight Watchers. I read somewhere. I mean, of course, it's killing you. It's killing you.
It must be doing something else.
It's got something else.
It is. There's something else is killing you. Yeah, inside and burning your insides out on a sort of gradual basis. But yeah, it was. It's like 1 point on Weight Watchers. 0.
All right, so
I feel like we shouldn't really be saying. It's like we're sponsored by Diet Coke. Diet Coke is probably a very, very bad thing.
It's probably very bad for you. It's I don't know if it's better than, like, I drink a lot of coffee, but I put so much milk in my coffee that I'm pretty sure it's a meal, like by itself. So like, I don't have breakfast. I'll get up, but I will probably by 10 o'clock have had like a pint and a half of milk through cups of coffee. Whoa. Which like, because I'm just like, because I'll probably have had 4 cups of coffee by then, like half a pint of milk. Yeah, I am. Well, I imagine like the my bones are probably indestructible, but I haven't eaten, and then it'll get to lunchtime and I'm too rushed, so I'll eat like a packet of biscuits, and I mean literally like a packet. I'll just be like, right, I'm hungry, I need calories, I need food. Dunk, 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 dunk. Eat a packet of biscuits because I've got a packet of biscuits in my drawer. Completely miss lunch. Get home, feel terrible, feel worn down. Order a pizza. And then I think like there's
that is amazing.
None of it is working right.
I think we've just established all of us are basically ruining ourselves.
I don't have like, I see people who have Tupperware, and I see people who have like time on a Sunday night, you know, and they'll be like, oh, like I just Instagrammed my meals for the week, and it'll be like, you know, like them doling out like veg and for like all of that stuff, their meals for the week, and they'll maybe do some, you know, I don't have the forethought or the energy after a day's teaching to think about putting some oats out overnight to eat with blueberries in the morning. I don't have time for that, so I'll wake up late and I'll have a coffee, and that's, you know, I imagine there are people who can do it. I'm not one of those people, or I haven't found a way for it to be natural.
I just think teaching lends itself to being more unhealthy, because unless you are incredibly disciplined, which a lot of teachers are, right? I always marvel at people who get up at 5 a.m., go for a massive run in the dark, post a picture of it on X, and then drive to work after getting ready. I'm like, no, I
could never do that.
Never ever do
I
that.
could never do it.
Maybe I can do a run at night. Like I've done a run after work today, but of course that's, you know, it's sunny today. There's a beach nearby. You know, there's certain mitigating factors there. If it was grey and I was in like Manchester, I don't know whether I would have gone out today. So unless you're super disciplined, you have very finite periods of time to eat anything, and it is much more likely you want comfort food in school. For me, I just want something that makes me feel better quickly.
I think that's common.
To look forward to, you know, I have to have something that in the day where I'm like, I can't wait to eat that.
Yeah. A couple of years ago, so one of my neighbors is actually my really good friend who I used to work with in the same science department a couple of years ago. And I remember one year we had a New Year's resolution that we were going to start running before school, because we used to go to school together every day as well. And I was like, so we were going to start in the first weekend of the new year. I think this was like 2022. And I was like, let's just hope. But then our plan was, if it's raining, our agreement between us was, if it's raining, we're not going to do it. Like, that's the day we're going to take off. So I was like, I hope that the first Saturday of the new year is raining. And it was. So we just never got started. But like, we told everyone we were going to start and then never did.
I agree. I think the odds are stacked against you. I can think of examples of people who, like, I know of teachers who like proper cycle into school, not like your little commuter bike, proper, you know, road bike, Lycra, cycle into school kind of thing. Like,
well, I tried to do that.
There are people who do it.
I tried to do that 10 years ago. I bought a bike. I burnt the bike. No, I didn't really. But I bought the bike. I went in, like, I did maybe 3 weeks. Maybe I managed, but it was just such a faff. And you know, you get to school, you're like, I probably need to have a shower, or you know, and then that adds time on, and you're worried about whether you can leave, you know, when you need to leave the house and all that. So you sleep less well because you're worried about when you have to leave to make it in time. I mean, this is what I mean about it. Again, that was probably the mindset I was in at the time as well, which was, I mean, I'm still in that a little bit, but nowhere near as bad as I was in terms of like just the stress levels, just feeling like I couldn't do anything apart from that. You know, it's probably why I burnt out. But I did try it. I tried the whole cycling to work thing, couldn't sustain.
But what I mean, I think like everything in teaching is stacked against you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm like? Sure. You know, it's not a profession where it's easy to be healthy.
Anyways, what do you think the most read article on TES is at the moment?
Okay. Either I've seen something about behavior.
Don't
No, I'm not cheating. So
yeah,
I'm either going. No, I'm either going with behavior, right? And there is a school in Liverpool where they are having to salute, and the mum's upset about it.
No,
So,
I've
I
seen
think
that.
I will guess.
It's really
Either
obvious. It's a really obvious
the
one.
one about the teachers on strike because
No.
of the poor behavior, or the one something to do with behavior and
No.
teachers getting like hit and stuff.
oh,
No,
Okay, wait.
Inclusion.
Inclusion.
No.
pay.
Do you want me to give you a clue? It's
Give us a clue.
Yeah.
That's
Pay.
pay. And
Oh,
wait,
the
but the
pay
angle.
rise, 4% pay rise.
I'm going with the angle here, and the angle is the fact that, like, I think a quarter of it is unfunded.
No, it is
No,
literally an article. Right, I'll tell
about
you.
the 4% pay rise.
It's like,
It's literally
yay.
an article showing you the pay scales. Okay, so my next question to you is,
Oh,
what is the minimum that a teacher starting in September 2025 in England can be paid?
Okay, well, that's hard because I teach in Wales, so I'm going to deduct 4% from whatever my estimate is. It must be around. Oh my God, it was so long ago that I was an NQT. I'm going like around 28.
More.
30,
More.
32,
More.
33.
Well, 32,
Between 32 and 33.
32,900 is the absolute minimum that a teacher entering the profession in September 2025 can get paid. In London, the minimum, and it says, I mean, it's a bit misleading. It says for those teaching in London, this could be as much as, and then there's a figure. So I don't know if that's the same, but anyway, minimum for London?
About 36, 37.
More.
It's changed now. Oh no, wait, because M1 in inner London would be about maybe 38 and
more
half.
for this. With the pay rise, the minimum is 40,300 for London.
Okay.
As in, with the pay rise.
Yeah, with the pay rise for September 25.
Wow.
Okay, my issue with it
used to be, I'd say before the last pay rise, that would have been about M5 in London.
Well, I mean, the last 24-25.
No, M4.
For the comparison, 24-25, it's 31,600. 25-26 is going to be 32,900.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, like, honestly, in 2022, I would say M5, because I remember I was a union rep that year. M5 was about what M1 now would be, with this pay rise.
Yeah, M5 is according to so this is outside London. M5 is 40,400.
Wow.
Is M5, so that's outside of London. And in 25-26, it's going to be 42,000 M5.
I think it should be a rule, Tom, that no one can do this. They can't print graphs like that unless they're going to show, like, next to it, my electricity bill and my mortgage rate going up. Because it sounds like, as you say, like we're off. It sounds great. You know, there's more money.
No, I totally agree with that. But to put another slant on this, it wasn't that long ago that as a you know, when I started, I know it was 18 years ago, but I mean, fair enough. But even so, things have gone significantly up even in the last sort of 5 years, right? I mean, when I started, I was in Wales. Granted, I think I was on 20.
Wow.
When I started. Yeah. So I was in an inner London school, and because I was willing to teach all three sciences, because I think a lot of academies have done this thing now where there are like different
pay packages for like different people, and I don't really agree with it, but I mean, technically have benefited from it in the past. So my first school, because I was willing to, in my interview, teach all 3 sciences, they actually started me on M3. So I started on M3 in London, which at the time, I don't even remember what it was, but I think it was 35.
Well, now, do you want to know what it is now? M3 in London?
No, it was 37. I started on 37.
Okay, well, now it's, this September it'll be 44.
Wow.
So it's gone up.
I mean, I'm happy for teachers, but yeah, like I feel like I kind of cheated the pay scale, because I did M3, 4, 5, and then I became SLT, and then just went to the L scale.
Yeah.
But like, because I didn't start on M1, I remember I didn't really know I didn't understand like teacher pay that well, but I do know that even the last pay rise did make a big difference for a lot of people.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads, no distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Obviously, that the pay rise is also extended to leadership as well. So there's some significant pay rises there. You know,
I think the weird thing for us at the moment, right, is this feels like an amazing thing to a lot of us because of when we started. Teachers were underpaid. So now it feels like more. But to people, sort of the generation before, my parents were teachers, when they talk about it, I came into it at a low point in teaching where teachers, pay had been dropped, or at least hadn't kept track with inflation. And then I came in there. So now going up this much back to, somewhat, or at least getting us a little bit higher up to where we could have been or should have been if we were tracking inflation, feels amazing. We're going, oh my God, wow, that, this is a really good thing. When in fact, does it even get us back to where a straight line would have been from, say, the 80s or the 90s following inflation? Does it even get us back to where we would have been? Because it doesn't feel like when I talk to teachers, they're doing all right. They're doing all right, but it doesn't feel like, it's a really well-off profession or or particularly even, we are middle class by nature, but it doesn't feel like, certainly not the prestige maybe, or the expectation of maybe what it used to be.
In the private sector world now, sort of early mid 20 somethings are changing jobs all the time. That's the first thing, right? They're changing jobs quite regularly, every year even, right? Whereas I wouldn't have dreamt of that. I wouldn't have dreamt of moving, even if I wasn't in teaching, right? Imagine whatever job I'd have been in when I was 21 out of uni, I wouldn't have gone, I'm going to move on from here in a year or two, and I'm going to make sure that I increase my salary when I do that by X amount of money. So I think that's been a change. And I think obviously just salaries have gone up across the board, and I think the expectation amongst sort of graduates and stuff has gone up a lot in terms of salary. So I don't know. I mean, do you think that is going to be attractive enough to get enough people from a financial point of view? Do you think that's now sort of mid-range attractive to a graduate?
I don't know if it's that. If that was the point, I don't think this is enough. If it's about stemming the flow maybe of people leaving, I think it might do something. And I think as like a signifier, as a story to say above inflation pay rise is a really strong message to be saying to teachers, you know, about their worth, about their value, about, you know, where the education system might be going, to rather than it being, oh my God, like I remember coming into the profession, you know, the Gove years and things feeling like a battle, you know, being that, you know, we were referred to as the blob, you know, it being very combative. And I can't imagine through that period. And now I think to reflect on someone saying, you know, we've accepted an above inflation pay recommendation seems like wow, like, oh my God, they do value us. And I wonder if that's more the message than will we ever be competitive with the private sector, or will we ever, you know, I think it is probably more of a gesture, more of a message to teachers rather than to potential teachers.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, by the way. I think it will be better for retention than recruitment. And I think the biggest thing, well, a really big thing that impacts recruitment is just the wider mainstream perception of teachers. And until that changes and you can stop getting on the news for refusing to follow like a school uniform policy, then I just don't think, until like the mainstream view of teaching improves, I think there will remain problems with recruitment.
But this might be the start of it. Maybe this is part of a bigger push to rehabilitate the image of teachers in some way. Not that from our point of view, but to change it in the wider perception of, let's stop vilifying teachers. Let's start working and valuing them, because if we don't, we won't have any.
Yeah, I think it's a start, but I also think there's still scope for using it to denigrate teachers. I think some people might be like, you know, schools don't have enough resources for pupils, you know, for some of the funding or some of the money is going into, you know, lining teachers' pockets. I still feel like there is scope to use this against teachers. But I do agree. I see what you're saying though.
Oh, 100%. And, you know, I wouldn't put it past, you know, a couple of weeks time, we won't be getting headlines pitting teachers against doctors or against nurses, saying, oh, teachers got paid more, nurses aren't going to be. Who do you value more? And all of that divide and conquer stuff going on that always happens.
Yeah, watch in September when there are like news articles that say, you know, after their lovely long holiday, teachers are now going to be earning, you know, X amount more after they've just spent 6 weeks off, whilst everyone else, like doctors have been saving lives, and the police have been dealing with issues, whatever. Like I see that coming in September. I sound like such a cynic.
No, do you know what? I remember saying to like a younger member of staff in the sort of the COVID years, and they were like, oh, you know, there was, I think it was nearer the start when we were clapping people, and teachers were included in that clapping as being, you know, valuable people. And I was like, just wait, because soon it will be our fault. It will be our fault soon. Just brace yourself, because closing schools will be our fault, and we will have done it and damaged the world or whatever, and we'll be, you know, be hated. And it feels, yeah, you're right. It feels maybe a little like that we've got a little storm coming, and some of us might sound cynical, but we've been through it so many times now.
Yep.
No, I hear you. Another article in at number 3 was teachers at Outwood Grange to strike over longer school day. And a letter to parents from the trust says both NEU and NASUWT will strike next month over a plan to extend the school day to meet minimum expectation. Let me hang on. Let me find out more.
And what's that? What are those expectations?
No idea.
Like, had they made some sort of mistake in their timetabling and not given everyone their full schooling hours?
I'll tell you right now. So, Trust has 40 schools in total. It defended its plan to extend the school day in February, saying that its secondary school day currently falls short of the government's 32.5 hour a week minimum.
Yeah.
It is proposing to increase the length of a school day and teaching contact by 30 minutes a day, so the day ends at 3 p.m. rather than 2:30 p.m.
Like, that's a real
Depends
problem
when they
because
start, though, no?
if they're not meeting the minimum hours of the day that's
Yeah,
expected,
can't complain.
then it's going to happen, right? I would imagine that this isn't as simple as that. If the unions are, you know, talking strike action, then, you know, is there more to the story around how it was implemented, how it was consulted on, how they were informed of it? Because I don't see how you can argue too much about, you know, it's a national expectation, the hours that should be taught for young people.
Yeah, I actually think the school day should be longer anyway, but I know that's kind of controversial. But I just think that, like,
So
a lot of break times.
Just
Yeah,
a
go on.
caveat here. So this, under the new structure, the school day will commence at 8:30 a.m. and conclude at 3 p.m. I mean, that sounds. I mean, in all the schools I've
Sounds
worked
like a normal day.
It's like
Yeah.
all this. I've never worked in this. Have I? Maybe I've worked in one that was that short. Maybe.
Depending on your lunch, I think.
Yeah,
where
that's
I'm
what I mean.
where,
It depends how long.
where I am at the moment, we finish at 10 to 3, but start at 8:30, finish at 10 to 3. And so that seems in keeping. But as I say, like, it, you know, a lot of these things can depend on how they're consulted on, how it's implemented, you know, and if people have been brought along in that process. So I don't know, that's a tough one. Sounds like there's more to it.
Though. Interesting. Anyway, do you want to know what the others were?
Yeah. I want to know, like, are you telling me that this Liverpool school that I've heard all over social media is not on there?
It's not on there.
It's not there.
This is just Tez that I'm looking at. So
I just, you know, I heard a lot about it. I feel it.
Unless it's maybe, hang on, let me see on Moshed. No, I'll tell you one that was interesting that was on the most shared list was an article about teaching abroad, saying about the growth in international schools. I was going to ask you guys, if you could choose a country in the world to teach in, where would it be? And why?
That is tough. That is
could be a region. Could be a region. Maybe a country's a bit too specific. I mean, for me, like I've gone back to Spain after having a stint in Spain. So in 2017-18. So I feel like I just, yeah, I'm sort of addicted to Spain. But if I wasn't Spain, Portugal would be pretty good. God, that's boring. All right, if I had to choose outside, let's say I had to choose outside Europe, then. I mean, if I was to go after this, I might go, you know, Eastern Europe. I find interesting. You know, I like the idea of some sort of pop-up school, startup school in like somewhere like Montenegro or, you know, maybe the Balkans somewhere, or even up. I mean, I looked years ago. I looked at like Estonia, and I looked at Latvia. Yeah, that interests me. I must be honest. Central Europe doesn't interest me. I don't know why. Like France, Germany, Austria, Italy don't really interest me. Outside Europe, maybe Japan.
You could join Will. Will's there, isn't he?
Will's there. Will is there. Will Mercer, our fellow TTR host, is in Japan. So was Megan Goods. fellow TTR
Oh.
team member. And
I
both
think
spoke
I
very
would.
highly.
I think I'd go. Honestly, I don't know, but I'd want to go somewhere like hot. I think maybe South America. I think I'd. I'm not sure why. I feel like I mean, I've been doing. I've been learning Spanish on Duolingo.
Impressive.
But I don't know. I've got a friend that's moving to South America to teach. She's really into sport, and like I've had family recently visit South America, and it just looks really nice. It looks really nice, and I just thought, I don't know though. I feel
South
like
America is a big place, though. I think you need to.
I know.
I mean,
I'm
that's
being,
like saying I want to teach in Africa. Like it's just like
I don't really have an answer. Yeah, I
Yeah.
know. I actually did a school year in Africa. I did year 5 in Egypt.
oh nice.
It was totally different, totally different. I used to get a school bus in the mornings. Everything was done in Arabic. I didn't speak I didn't know anything about Arabic, but I learned it while I was there. I was there, and yeah, it was actually really fun and really different. We had a horse in our playground. That was just so different. When I came back in year 6, I really struggled to like readjust, even though I went back to the same school I'd been in from nursery. It was just so hard. Like I remember we were doing like geometry. I was doing like circle theorems in maths, even though I was like 9, 10. It was really cool, to be fair. I had a great year. But I don't know. I don't actually have an answer. Just said South America.
While Nathan's thinking about it, should we give a shout out to John Cat and just
Yeah,
say
why not?
thanks for sponsoring us, John Cat, and go to johncatbookshop.com and get 20% off any John Cat book by using the code JCTTR2425. There you go.
I've got a topic for us to talk about.
Go on.
It's the one that I saw people tweet about recently, including you, Tom, and it was about inclusive schools. I don't know if you saw about a week ago, there was like a lot of talk about, I think there was this article that came out.
Oh, it was the toilet break one.
The Center for Young Lives. No,
yeah,
you know,
the toilet break.
Inclusion.
The toilet break one. It was about toilet break.
I don't remember anything about a toilet break.
Well, that's the bit I read. That was from the B. I didn't read the report. I just read the BBC article about the report. But go on. Tell us something about it.
I'll read a tweet to you.
Mm-hmm.
It's not by me, is it?
I mean, you'll find out. It says, apparently inclusive schools have low exclusions and detentions, according to a new report from the Centre for Young Lives. And I have a big problem with this. If bullying is rife, if teacher abuse is habitual, if students don't feel safe on the day-to-day, then to be truly inclusive, you might need higher exclusions, especially in the short to medium term, and a rigorous detention system. Happy for exclusions and detentions to be low if behaviour is fantastic. Otherwise, it's just a race to the bottom.
Yeah, I know who said that. and I stand by every word of it.
I think, by the way, I think it's a completely valid. I just thought, because when I typed inclusive schools, it's actually the first tweet that came out. So I just thought, yeah, I'll read this one. But by the way, I think this is totally valid. And I thought maybe we could talk about inclusive schools generally. I just kind of read your tweet to remind you. But I think it's a great topic to talk about because loads of people tweeted about it last week. I can't remember everything that was said, but I do feel like there's this kind of and by the way, you didn't say anything wrong there, Tom. I actually agree with you. But I think what happens a lot is generally on X, I think people associate inclusion with low exclusions, and I feel like it's not always the case.
Yeah, cool.
I've worked. 100%. Yeah, it's not always the case, and I just thought inclusion would be really good to talk about because my view on inclusion, and I know there's loads of people that don't agree with me, but I think when I think of inclusion, if I compare it to zero tolerance, and I mean another issue I have with inclusion is inclusion exists in every school. Even if somebody doesn't like the behavior policies in a particular school, every single school has an element of inclusion, an element of reasonable adjustments, an element of including all their pupils. equals, like they all have the same opportunities. And so I don't like to like divide schools, because obviously everyone has inclusion. But I think one thing that going to Peru taught me is, I feel like when it comes to like, say, a zero tolerance school, and again, I hate to divide schools in this way, because like, you know, there's too many gray areas. But anyway, let me just get to the point, because I'm rambling now. I feel like with zero tolerance, I often think there's like often a big point made. I feel like a lot of it is about examples, and kind of treating everybody exactly the same consistently, because then that's part of sending a really clear message, right? And when I think of inclusion, I often think, or what I really like about it is that I think it takes into account the kind of variation or the unprecedented or unplanned circumstances that can impact children. So I'm not necessarily saying just because like a child's been misbehaving per se, that means you now like move the goalposts and don't exclude them. Like I totally, like Tom, what I liked about that tweet was, I do definitely agree that sometimes people conflate inclusion with just keeping exclusions really low, but that it is actually at the expense of either other students or teachers. But I think what I really like, I mean, inclusion isn't really the right word, but what is it called again? Trauma-informed practice. I think what I like about that is, I think it's an individualistic behavior system. And I feel like it takes into account the fact that there will be loads and loads of circumstances that can impact a child at any given point, and that is kind of used to help them reach the end goal. Like I think what I like about inclusion and trauma-informed practice is that I feel zero tolerance doesn't do, is that it takes into account the risk to a child's life if they were to be permanently excluded. I feel like that's missing from zero tolerance for me. And I know I totally get that it's considered like controversial. I'm not explaining my point really well, but I know it's considered controversial, but I think for me, that's what I like about trauma-informed practice. The fact that a risk to a child's life is considered in the instance of a permanent exclusion more so, or to a higher degree than it is in zero tolerance.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, the thing is, I mean, again, it depends what zero tolerance means. Zero tolerance to what? I mean, there'll be many out there saying, right, these schools have zero tolerance to uniform infringements, and kids get, permanently excluded because they say boo to a goose, right? Which, purely anecdotally just doesn't happen, because to exclude somebody, there has to be a process. They have to have done something, right?
But that's what I mean. Like, you know what? Sorry, Tom, to interrupt you there.
No.
Honestly, I'm not really explaining this well, but you know what? You just reminded me. I feel like a lot of behavior policies are very reactionary, and a lot of the time, I actually think it's quite easy to predict a child that could go on to become permanently excluded, especially in the case of persistent disruption or persistent disruptive behavior, because they'll be doing a lot of the same things again and again and again. And yes, there's a process, but I often feel like this process is missing. I feel like it kind of is missing preventative measures put in place. And I know that
I disagree with that.
Every school, no matter how strict they are, will try and do a lot of things for students who are persistently disruptive. But I also feel like a lot of these things don't work, and schools still continue to use them. Like, for example, one of the first things that happens to a child that like disrupts a lot of lessons is they're put on a report, right? And people say, those little paper reports that haven't changed since I was in school, that like teachers have to sign, and then tutors have to check, and then a head of year has to check or whatever. Like, I feel like that's useless. I don't think I've ever known of a child that something like that has helped particularly.
I disagree. I've seen that be effective, at least in the short term.
I think it's only if you think of children on like a bell curve, like say all children in a school, if you think of them on like a bell curve, the overwhelming majority will like fall in the middle. And that's like the children who are well behaved, you know, follow most instructions, might get the odd detention, might have the odd bad day. Like the overwhelming majority will fall in the middle. And then you've got two extremes where you'll have a minority of students that are just, you know, doing the same thing again and again, and you know, like they're exhausting a lot of the school's resources and time and stuff like that. I feel like if you put all kids on a bell curve, I think reports only work for those children that form the bulk of the bell curve. So like not the extremities. Like if you've got a child that's persistently disruptive in every single lesson, I don't think...
All right, Tom, can I jump in? Because I agree, but I think that's kind of the point. And I think of behavior policies far more like a filtering system, right? And so you talk about those ones that it does work for and those ones that it doesn't work for. And there will be some children who a stern look from the teacher works for. And that is your first filter. And if they pass through the first filter and it hasn't worked, you know, but 90% of them you've caught with that first filter, then a detention, and that catches some more with the second filter, and some still get through. And then you might have something more punitive, like a fixed term exclusion, which maybe is enough to catch some more in the right situation. But you're filtering out with these different behavior systems, filtering down to where the problem is. Now, the bit where I have in it, where it stops working, is I don't think a lot of people know, or probably don't have the money to do much with the ones who get through multiple levels of that, where actually, if you've excluded for 5 days this school year already that student, I don't think another 1 day fixed term exclusion is going to change their behavior. But at that point, you know, that filtering system of behavior, which I do think works, and where people kind of make a false assumption sometimes is they take something like, you know, a after school detention or a lunchtime detention and apply that to the child who would have got through all of the filters anyway, right? Who that was never going to work for, but we go through the stages. And so they say, oh, this child who, you know, massive problems in the community, lots of risk factors around them, you know, an after school detention they're not even going to turn up for. But we know that because that filter really isn't going to catch that child anyway. We need something else. At that point, when you get to talking about inclusion, the reality is anyone who complains about inclusion, we have as inclusive schools as the taxpayers are willing to pay for. And that's the bottom line, because you can reduce exclusions. You can, you know, feasibly think of a system where there would be no exclusions, but you would need to increase pastoral time. You would probably need to increase release time for all teachers to give them that time to work in a trauma-aware manner and plan their lessons as such and be aware of their students and do mentoring sessions. You know, the cost of it, you know, all of those pastoral officers. So you can be as inclusive as we can afford to be. And I think a lot of schools do a fairly good job with being as inclusive as they can with the funds that they've got.
Or
I don't
flip
think
that round,
you know,
to flip that round, why should people pay for individuals who refuse to take any personal responsibility for their own behaviors?
But at that point, that's not an educational, that's not, is it possible? That's almost
no, I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying what you've said is possible. I mean, what you've said is feasibly possible.
And that's where we get to that political decision of like, okay, you know, a bit like anything, you know, how much should the state help people who don't want to be helped? Or appear to bite the hand that's feeding them, all of those
that's
kind
a
of
bigger question.
aspects.
And obviously, from my perspective, I mean, it's a very tricky one. But, you know, we've gone so far down the path of searching pushing and looking for reasons and ways to accommodate, even when it comes to teacher assaults, even when it comes to having teachers' hands shoved indoors, or teachers pushed in the corridor, or, you know, teachers verbally abused, or teachers being pushed around during their duties, or teachers being, you know, squared up to on their way out of school, or whatever, right? Blah-de-blah-de-blah, list goes on. It's how far we want to go. You know, what you're suggesting is that we put in and, you know, whatever amount of money, just write it on a piece of paper, right? We just keep going and going and going and going to try and include everybody.
Right? No, mine would be the other way around, Tom. I think that, you know, for it to work, for truly inclusive schools to happen, you would need to put that funding at the front before issues happened. So identifying and prevention to stop them happening. Once you get to that stage, I mean, there is a massive expense to do anything with them. But if you wipe the slate clean, or said, actually, do you know what, our year 7 cohort, or even, you know, our year R cohort, we're looking again at Sure Start, right? And that was in the news this week about the fact that Sure Start really worked, right? Heaven forbid we've realized that, you know, setting people up to succeed is better at helping people succeed than dealing with the aftermath of people failing. But there's a cost, you know. I think some of the time we're stuck in this reverse way of kind of going, actually, right, once a child has hit a student, for me, once a child has hit a member of staff, or actually, to be fair, in some circumstances, another student, they have broken the social bounds of that environment, and some sort of reset needs to happen. And so, like, I am pro exclusion. Like, I want to prevent, but I don't want to prevent exclusions, and I hate that. And, you know, I hear it from different people when they talk about it, you know. And you'll hear that, you know, this school or that school or this local authority, that local authority have said they want to reduce exclusions. Then help us reduce the things that are causing exclusions. Help us reduce the number of excludable incidents. You know, help us make schools safer so we don't have to exclude. And that's a different thing to, you know, local authorities turning around and saying things like, right, everyone needs to cut down their exclusions by just not excluding. You know, that's a terrible idea.
I agree. Nathan, I feel like Nathan's just explained it way better than me there. Like, I genuinely feel very like scatterbrained today. But I, for the same reason, can't be against exclusions. I'm actually a governor as well, where I unfortunately do have to sometimes uphold a decision to exclude children. So, like, it's not a thing of me saying, like, you know, no children should be excluded. But I think Nathan put it really well there. The point I was trying to make, if we go back to the bell curve, is like, I feel like a lot of the current preventative behavior management strategies that exist only really exist for the children in the middle of the bell curve and not the children on the very ends of them.
But that's why I asked 5 minutes ago.
So exactly, like the point that Nathan made there, which I really liked, is when you've gotten to a point where a child is assaulting a teacher, it's already, you know, really, like, you've already reached a point in your school where the behavior policies have really been undermined because of the risk that staff have been put at. So, like, what I'm just trying to say is, I just feel like I wouldn't, like, I can't ever really be against exclusions until there are far more preventative strategies put in place. But exactly as Nathan said there, more money is kind of needed for that. But I just
I just make a point here? It really grinds my gears that there will be kids who are struggling to learn, who are fantastic kids, who deserve the world. They are in a classroom of 28 or 30, or in some cases 34, and you guys are suggesting that a student who is consistently abusive, consistently disruptive, consistently makes the wrong choice, okay, is going to get a one-to-one tutor from
No, not
that's what it is. We're saying that.
I think there are things you can do before that point.
Yes, but can I just say as well, if a child is disrupting a lesson, like they should, that no one should have to put up with like repeated disruption. I don't like support that at all. I just think there are loads and loads of strategies that can be used. Like I just feel like there aren't enough preventative strategies that are used in teaching. I feel like teachers often don't get enough training in those strategies. Like if I just use an example, a couple of years ago, I had this year 7 student who within a week, like, just knew that we were going to have a really tough time together. You know, like he just from the start, his behavior was really tough. And I just immediately thought, I'm going to try practice my own kind of, preventative strategies. So I made like a personalized, and I presented it to you before, Tom, at the TTR Science, the Teach Meet last year. But I just kind of made, I just looked at what he was doing wrong in that first week. Obviously, I followed the school behavior policies. I escalated it. I used the, traditional sanction system that week whilst I was kind of observing him. And then I made this really, personalized to-do list to just kind of help him, or to see if it would work. So it was essentially a set of instructions that I could see he wasn't following, and I just wrote them in the first person. So, but for everything. So like, I will come in and I'll get out my reading book. I will write the date and title. I will underline it. I will this, I will that. And then he just had to tick it off. And then at the bottom, what I did, because I just thought, look, this child is just going to end up stacking more and more and more behavior points. That's going to then become evidence. That's going to then be the school. And, no criticism of the school. It's a really inclusive school, and credit to them that I could even use these kind of strategies myself anyway. But I just thought, I knew if a year 7 child in their first week has already got behavior points across every single subject, giving him a couple more isn't going to do anything. And so inclusion for me was being considerate of myself, of that child, and also the rest of the children. I thought, I'm going to actually try this list. So rather than sanctions, what I had at the bottom, and I put it in red, I literally printed it in red, was I put a set of things that he had to avoid. And I would tick those. So it wasn't necessarily him. I would tick those bit in red if he did them. So things like, I called out when I was supposed to be working in silence, or I disturbed another people,
like a
etc.
report? Because I mean, report cards.
No. So what I did was, instead of give him a sanction or a detention for those things, I basically took away any previous positive like achievement points that he achieved. So I used it to kind of like negate the other stuff that he'd done correctly. So he could get a certain number of achievement points based on the previous part of the list. And what I did at the bottom was I would use that to like hold him accountable at the end of the lesson and take away. So I would be like, yes, you've underlined date and title, or you put your hand up to answer a question, but you also spoke to a person out of turn, or you disturbed another people, etc. And what eventually happened was he learned. Like, I feel like sometimes you can't even assume that every child can just follow instructions straight away. I feel like it's really easy to just label them as like, disruptive. And I'm not saying every child has underlying needs. He didn't necessarily have any needs, but like, I actually feel like this is the kind of stuff that I see as inclusion, or the kind of stuff that I don't see happening everywhere that I feel like could happen. But what eventually happened was that child was able to do everything in that exact order consistently. And eventually I just kind of took away that to-do list and kind of integrated him into the seating plan with the rest of the class. And he was fine for the rest of the year. He actually got a grade 9 at the end of year 7. And so the point I'm just trying to make is, what I feel like is sometimes missing, and I'm not against zero tolerance per se. And like I said earlier, I just kind of use that phrase generally, but I feel like there's no school.
Who is in favor of zero tolerance? What does zero tolerance mean?
No, but what I'm literally trying to say is, I don't like those kind of totalistic statements zero tolerance, trauma informed, because there is no school that is just one thing. Schools are really dynamic and complex. So but I'm just using zero tolerance in the context of the kind of behavior management strategies that typically you'd see labeled as zero tolerance. Do you know what I mean? Just so that I don't end up going on a massive tangent again. But I just think what's missing from a lot of those kind of stricter behavior policies or systems in schools is, rather than supporting a child as lowering the standards or not holding the line, I feel like you should see it as just putting more things in place to help them attain the same high standards. So I didn't change the standards or the expectations there for that class. Do you see what I mean? Like, I didn't ignore the school behavior system, but what I did is I just put more steps and more things in place, and that's what I see as inclusion. So like, I know it's taken me about half an hour to get to my point, but like, I just feel like that's really missing, and teachers don't get training on a wider range of strategies that could actually really support the children right on the ends of the bell curve, who are typically most likely to get excluded.
I think, you know,
Tom's just like,
the thing for me with it, and you know, and I applaud what you did, right? You taught a child how to engage in a learning environment, right? And what year group was it?
Year 7.
Like year 7. So do you know if he was having similar problems in primary school or not?
I don't know about primary school, but I know that he was in every other subject, because it kind of got to a point where on the, you could, other teachers in other subjects that taught him would come and observe me in science.
Okay, so you know, you went above and beyond. You took the steps, or whatever way we look at it. Like the kid needed a bit of help, and he provided with that appropriate help and things. I think the problem we have as a system is we're dramatically underfunded to do that, to take time to do it, because like if you had been, you know, an NQT, or you'd been too stressed out by work, or like, you know, whatever, any number of situations. In fact, he had 8 other subjects that didn't do what you did, right? And he had his primary school that didn't do what you did.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I think that opportunity to act is missing, and will always be missing if teachers are overworked and overstressed and doing too many other things. And that's why, you know, I think there is time for fun, for if people want more of that, which I think they should do. But equally, I think we need to be realistic about the time that it takes away from other things. And that's what it always come back to is, you know, that half an hour pastoral conversation that a teacher could have at lunchtime, talking about their favorite football team or whatever to win over the one child, is a conversation they could have been having to move a child from a B to an A, or an A to an A star. And there will always be this cost kind of balance between who gets support and who doesn't, because, you know, we focus at certain points. You know, there's the CD borderline, as it was, and I talk about that because in Wales here we still have letter grades. You know, I know it's numbers in England now.
Can I just drop something in as well? Is in the example you gave, Yasmin, as well, is, you know, whatever it is that a teacher's doing, important thing is 2 things. One, behavior is authentically better, and it's not sort of I'm bribing you to do something by whatever means that I have, whether it be whatever, right? I'm doing anything to just keep you in the room, even though you're being sort of subtly rude to me. I'm doing X, Y, Z, and, you know, I feel better because you're slightly better than you are wherever else, but actually it's still nowhere near good enough. But sort of that whole, you know,
look, Tom,
maybe it's about making the teacher themselves feel better about saying, you know, there's something happening here, but actually, you know, I'm not saying this is your case, by the way, but I'm saying that it often happens if someone says, oh, I've transformed it, I've done the X, Y, Z. But when you actually get into it and you actually really look at it, you're going, that's slightly better, but is it because you're bribing them with that? And also, it's still not anywhere near the sort of levels of like standard sort of respect that you really are trying to aim for. I don't really know what point I'm getting at there. No,
Tom. Look, Tom, I completely get what you're saying. And to go back to that tweet, actually, one thing that a thing that really stood out to me about that is you mentioned like a race to the bottom, and I genuinely totally agree that one of the things, like even in the example I gave, even though, yes, like it worked in that instance, I am just one person, that was one child, there is a lot of scope for it to go wrong. I completely agree with you. There is a really thin line between, you know, what happened there and like bribery or like a lowering of expectations. I totally agree with you. And like, to just tell you another story really quickly, and I promise I'll be quick this time. I once worked in a school where vapes were allowed. Yeah, and I know that sounds mad, but they were allowed if you handed it in the morning. Nathan just like perked up there, but like, and like genuinely, I feel like it was like, honestly, listen to this. I was like, so like, you know, pro inclusion and like, yeah, all of this, and then I went there, and actually, a lot of my views reverted back to being like a lot stricter. Actually, after I went to that school, yeah, it changed me, because what happened there was we had this policy where in the morning you had to hand in your mobile phone and you had to hand in a vape if you had one. I would have to put it in like a sealed plastic wallet, whatever, with your name on it, and you'd get it back at the end of the day. Now, the thing about vapes was you could bring it to school with you in the morning, so long as you handed it to staff. I was SLT there, but I wasn't. I had nothing to do with behaviour.
And then in those sort of cultures, you get the whole thing of, well, if you're really good in the morning, we'll give you your vape during lunchtime, right?
Honestly, it's like you read my mind. So I'll tell you. I will tell you what happened. So the policy was, if you don't hand in your vape, the deputy head is going to break it with a hammer, whatever. He's going to chuck it away. That's what he used to say. I'm going to smash it with a hammer. You're not going to get it back because you didn't give it to us at the start. And I used to say the whole point should be vapes are not allowed because it's against school policy, or vapes are not allowed because it's bad for your health. It shouldn't be based on what they do or don't do. Anyway, what ended up happening, I ended up teaching a lesson soon after that policy started. I was also a science teacher there. And I just saw this like kind of cloud. Like, I turned away for a second, and obviously like vapes smell like Skittles.
You told me this story.
And anyway, this kid, I was like, hand it over. He tried to gaslight me. He was like, I don't have anything, like, you're making it up. Got the same deputy head who made the policy. He took this, I eventually got the vape off the kid. I gave it to the deputy head and they left together. And what then happened is this kid came flying back into my room a couple of minutes later and then called me like a racial slur in another language, in the Bengali language. And I basically text my friend and I asked her what it meant. And she basically told me it actually literally translates to black monkey. So what then happened was this child ended up getting a fixed term exclusion. But when I was speaking to the head teacher, what had happened was the deputy head gave him the vape back and sent him back to my lesson. So he was like, you've been caught with it now, put it away for the rest of the day, go back to your science lesson. So it shifted it from being problem being it shifted the problem for the child being the behavior policy to the problem being me. Do you know what I mean? So like,
yeah.
Just as another example of, you know, like a race to the bottom.
This is a way smaller example than that, but even just last week or a couple of weeks ago.
Need a smarter way to teach? Wish your lessons had more impact? Eduflix.com. Stream educational films for teachers and students in or out of the classroom. Keep students engaged. No ads. No distractions. Try it free for 30 days at eduflix.com/try. Use code TTR. Get 50% off all orders made before June 1st. Eduflix.com.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading.
You know, I've had a few kids actually this academic year say to me, can we work that detention back in the lesson?
I hate that.
If we're good for the rest of the lesson, I'm like, no, that's I don't know where you're getting that from, but that's just not the way that I work with things. That's not going to happen.
I always say you can.
That's a much lesser example. That's a much lesser example of what you've just described, but it's the same thing. It's this whole idea of, it's like I say, it's this whole idea of no matter the cost, and what you've just said is a perfect example of this.
Yeah.
No matter the cost, we are going to accommodate. We are going to, now I'm not saying we shouldn't try to accommodate, because that's part of our jobs, but there's got to be some boundaries in terms of what we as adults, just normal human beings, are going to sort of tolerate. And sometimes I think the levels of toleration go so low that they're almost on the floor, right? Fortunately, I no longer work in a school like that. I mean, part of it though is again, it's really tricky, because the school I'm thinking of in my head that may have been a bit like that, they were it wasn't all about, some people will say it's just the leadership. It's just on the leadership. They're not, it's just the leadership, right? I don't fully buy into that. I don't fully buy into that. I understand what people are saying, the leadership, the policies and all that, and the staff all working together, it all makes a difference. I get it. But I do not buy into this idea that you can take, it's a little bit like what I said about Ofsted judgments, but saying this school's rated outstanding. Take the staff out of there, put them into the school that is currently in special measures, where there are a ton of kids who are running, who it's not even running riot. They're just completely disengaged with the idea of needing to learn anything. Okay. Actually, I think Ray last week on TTR was talking about this, talking about the difference between kids in London and outside London, talking about maybe aspiration, maybe, sort of interest in learning and what I don't. Yeah, I mean, so many will disagree with me, and that's fine. They will say you can take an idea or a system and a way of doing things, like out of, I don't know, Michaela, and then you go from there and you import that into Coastal Academy in North Wales, where I spent the first 5 years of my career. And I'm just, I can't make that leap. I can look at it and go, you might make some inroads, but I struggle to say that you can convert the entire culture to such an extent. They're going to disagree with me, because they're going to point to schools in places like Sheffield and all the rest of it. But a lot of it for me comes down to cohorts.
I think for me, yeah. And another thing I'll say, I've worked in all kinds of schools, ones with really traditional behavior policies, trauma-informed schools, alternative provisions. I just think for me, the most successful behavior policy is the one where staff always back other staff 100%. Like, I feel like for me, that's just the best recipe for success in a school, no matter what your policies are.
There's someone who that though now, Yasmin, and say, yeah, but what about safeguarding? Because I remember Catherine Burble-Singh said something like she got absolutely battered for it.
Yeah, I remember that.
I can't remember exactly what she said, but it was along the lines of, I'm always going to
100%.
Right.
Yeah. Like, I think the best behavior, like, I've seen schools where teachers will be told, use on call, make sure you log any behavior issues, and SLT will come and collect that child. But at the same time, it doubles up as like a cursory judgment on that teacher's perceived abilities. And I have a huge issue with that. I like, obviously there are, like, and when I say back teachers 100%, I do remember that time where Catherine Burble-Singh got attacked on Twitter. Obviously there are exceptions in that, and I'm not talking about the Catherine Burble-Singh one, but there are exceptions where you always kind of know at the back of your mind, any teacher could also theoretically be reported to the head teacher for potential safeguarding breaches. But if you park that for a minute, I think the best behavior policy is one where other staff back staff 100% in any decision that they make about correcting or addressing a child's behavior. That to me is the best recipe for success, no matter what your actual policies are. Any time where something goes wrong, it's usually when children find gaps, or that they're able to see inconsistencies, and because the only people really, or the people that suffer, are other teachers. It's other teachers. That's my big thing about behavior is backing staff, making sure even when no one can see you, that you're never undermining another member of staff. You know, children, anytime they've come to me with a complaint or frustration about another member of staff, I always say, I'm sure there is really good reason for why they did that. I just kind of go along with, you know, supporting the teacher. I will never be there like, oh, you know, they behave for me, or, you know, like, you know, that kind of typical. I know, but this is what I mean. And so what I feel like is sometimes missing from the debate in education is, why is the kind of behavior of teachers never addressed when we talk about behavior management in schools, or the disadvantages teachers potentially face? I think it's a big part of teaching. I
would disagree with it on a technicality with something you said there, Jasmine, which is that it is about backing the teacher. I would say that it is about, for me, anyone who is doing it is letting the student down as well, right? It's about supporting that student. So if they come to you, if they've used a phone in class and they're unhappy about it, and you're SLT and you just want to make them quiet, so you tell them to turn it off and stick it in your bag, and we won't tell anyone, I won't take it off you. You are not helping the child.
Absolutely.
You're undermining the teacher. So you're not helping them, but you're also not helping the child, and you're not helping any other teacher in the school. The thing to help that child is to take the time to take the phone, help them through the sanction, which they have to do. Because, you know, they've broken a clear rule. They will have to do the sanction. The phone will have to go, you know, behind reception or in the safe or wherever it goes when it gets confiscated. That helps the child. That
and
should
not just
help
the child.
child.
I agree with that completely.
You know, and them not doing it is them actively not helping a child behave better next time. And I think that's where it really falls down, because you will see people who it happens to, right, who are doing that because it's quicker, it's easier, it's less hassle. I've got to get back to my office, breaks in 5 minutes anyway. Oh, you know, let's just pat this one back down. Oh, you're not going to swear at the teacher again. Okay, go back into class then. You know, it's all been, you know, brushed under. If you're not addressing the issue, you're not helping the child. Like that easy forgiveness or brushing it under the carpet or ignoring it not only doesn't help the teacher, not only doesn't help all of the teachers in your school, but it doesn't even help the child, because they've learned actually a really bad habit from that. They've learned a really bad lesson from it. They could have learned a semi-positive lesson, which is, okay, yeah, I definitely shouldn't get my phone out in the teacher's class, in Mr. Rogers' class anymore. Probably I shouldn't be that bothered about getting my phone out in anyone's class. In fact, am I using my phone too much just in general? You know, or is it a bigger issue that I've got concerns at home that, you know, that I'm worried about my phone or things, and I need to speak to someone to get help with that about? There's the conversation to be had. That's how you address the behavior, not by, oh, just turn it off and stick it in your bag and go back into class. It'll be lunch in 5 minutes. That doesn't help anyone in any situation.
Another thing I want to say about undermining pupils as well is, I mean, undermining teachers when it comes to behavior management. And to go back to what I said about staff and the role staff can sometimes play in putting certain staff at a disadvantage. Last year I was in a role where I was a senior leader and my responsibilities were behavior for learning. So I would observe a lot of teachers and kind of help them with behavior management strategies in their lesson. If I went to a lesson and I saw that a pupil wasn't doing the right thing, I would actually I would give the teacher the opportunity to address that, because what I was avoiding was walking into a class, you know, as SLT in my, you know, jacket, and then kind of giving those children the perception that their teacher needed help. Like, it wasn't help. Like, if I had anything that I needed to say, I would make sure it didn't come from, if there was a child who wasn't doing what they were supposed to do, I would make sure it didn't come from me and it came from their classroom teacher. And I didn't like log these things. I didn't use it against them, but just my point being, you're their classroom teacher, you're their kind of point of authority, and and the person who's kind of running the room. And so I would just make sure I gave that teacher the chance. And one thing I've noticed that's increased a lot in schools is, you know, people coming in, doing learning walks, sit up straight, you need to do this or that. Like, I feel like, what message does that send to a class if somebody else comes in and, you know, starts to help manage the behavior? Like, what message does that send to those pupils about their teacher?
Play devil's advocate. By the way, this will have to be the last thing, because we've been on for 90 minutes nearly. We've been through everything that we could possibly go through. The weather, you know, exclusions. Inevitably, we end up on that. But I was going to say that, you know, to play devil's advocate, there's people out there who would say, well, it's sort of like modeling. It's sort of like team teaching. I don't agree with this, by the way. I'm more of the sort of, what I get what you're saying, but you know, there's that other way of looking at it, of saying we need people to sort of go in there and model what everybody should be doing, right? But I do agree with you, right? I mean, if, for example, you know, let's imagine a teacher's in a class and I don't know, let's say it's a uniform thing, right? And, you know, and they're in a class and, I don't know, two of the students in the class, the teacher hasn't asked them to do whatever it is they're supposed to have asked them, you know, in line with the uniform policy, right? And then a senior leader comes in and sort of in front of that teacher says, so-and-so and so-and-so, do this, do this, do this, do this. You shouldn't be doing this. That isn't one that's good, is it? That should be one that's more of maybe a chat afterwards of like, hey, just to let you know, I spotted a couple of kids who weren't doing this. I mean, that's probably a bad example, but you get my point.
Oh no,
I do get your point. I feel like it. Go on, Nathan. I'll let you. I've said enough.
I dislike it as a management style. That what you described, right? I dislike it. This kind of pulling up the bootstraps, saying this kind of performative, setting high expectations. Whereas, in that scenario, either the teacher didn't notice because there's too much else on them, right? Or the teacher did notice and they actively made the decision not to address it because it wasn't worth the hassle, for whatever reason, of setting a detention the kid never turns up to, calling on call that never gets arrives,
which would be the wrong thing to do.
No,
but
it is the
wrong thing to do, but understandable.
Yeah,
but wrong.
But that's I don't blame that on the teacher for not doing it, right? Because that is the only survivable action. Like the only other option is that they really don't care as a teacher, and maybe there is a performance management type issue that you need to address, which I think is incredibly rare. I don't think anyone, you know, that's such a rare thing that it's worth parking off as a last consideration ever, right? But if a teacher is not doing it, you coming in and making a public performance of it doesn't make them do it anymore, just makes them more wary of you. Whereas, you know, having a conversation with them afterwards and saying, look, you know, what led us to this point? And they say, you know, I knew I had an observation. I was stressed out by that. I was flicking through my lesson plans. I was focused on doing A, B, and C that I have to show in all of my observations because I need to be on Pastor's Perch and live marking and helicopters teaching.
I was just focusing on teaching.
Yeah.
Like,
sorry, I just
got carried away with trying to do a really good job in maybe a challenging situation, right? And
oh my god, I do form lessons, and sometimes I don't notice, you know, everyone's shoes because I'm dealing with an issue. In the corridor, someone can walk past me and I can say hello to them, and they might have one of their buttons undone, and I might not notice because I'm trying to find something else to get off the photocopier because, you know, all of these things happen. That, you know, and I think, you know, the question is, why didn't I notice? And can we reduce that load? You know, we talk about kids' cognitive load all the time. We don't talk about teachers' cognitive load.
Thank you. Thank you.
You know, when we're jumping through so many hoops, or we've got a, you know, twilight after school for 2 hours that we've got to do something for, or we've got, this or that going on, or you're real panics because this is a tough class and
It's
I don't know if I've
thing.
got a TA.
I mean, to give another example, it's the same thing, and this is where I was going to touch on this today, weirdly, but we never got onto it. Is okay, similar example, but imagine the thing is like you're not doing a retrieval quiz. It's the first 5 minutes of the lesson. I've walked in. You're not doing a retrieval. That sort of why isn't that happening? Right? It's the same thing, right? It's like, normally I would try to do that, but whatever the reason is, there shouldn't really need to be that sort of lack of trust sort of situation of, are you trying to undermine whatever it is by not doing this? Well, obviously 9 times out of 10, that's 1 in 100 that might be the case, right? I mean, 99% of the time, it's just going to be a teacher trying their best, maybe doing what's best for that class in that situation, maybe deviating from the handbook, maybe deviating from the scripts and the everything that needs to be blocked in at particular moments and times. Okay. Same thing on the behavior issue, but it's a different thing, but it's the same thing. It's like, how do we approach? And this is where, next time we do this, we'll have to talk about this, learning walks, because
let's do performance
I've
management.
got so much to say.
Do performance management next time.
Let's do next time we do this. We'll talk about. Well, we'll touch on that. I mean, I like the idea. We'll also do our usual thing of looking at what everyone else is reading, right? Because then it's not just about us, right?
I'll quickly type up a Tess article and get it to the top of the. Why performance management sucks most of the time.
So much on that. It's so much on that.
I've got so much to say.
Even the new age stuff, it's like our performance management is just unbelievably sort of holistic. And when you actually look at it, I don't know, we could discuss this. We could discuss this in great detail another time. Guys, it's been a pleasure. Thanks everybody for joining. We've had quite a few comments, which I haven't put up. I'll say shout out to people who've commented instead of putting the comments up. Anna said, hi, give us a cheeky wink. Paul's been watching, so thanks, Paul. Quite a few people have commented on the salary thing. So Sarah commented saying the UK average salary is 37k. To my mind, if you study the subject in depth and then study to teach, you should be on that amount at least as a teacher. It's fair, isn't it?
That's
anyway, guys, we could go on and on. So, guys, it's been a pleasure. We'll be back again soon on TTR. Keep watching, keep subscribing, keep liking. Drop us a like or whatever on YouTube or X or wherever you've watched this. And we hope you've enjoyed the chat.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.